There are two tales waiting for you, told one after the other by an odd set of two. So prepare yourself, dear one, because this is Drops of Darkness.
Hello, I'm Anodyne Vaughn, and welcome to our show, where each week my co-host Cameron Helkuik and I bring you a pair of stories plucked straight from the dark and endless void. This week I pulled a story from the archives, one of the first short stories I ever wrote for Drops of Darkness, back when the show was nothing more than a bunch of random ideas. After that, Cameron picked out for this week a story about a doppelganger experience. So let's get into it. Stranger and someone are waiting. I am Stranger, and I tell only fantasies. Whenever your world has a grip on your throat, I am there, waiting to unleash the monsters that sleep in my mind, so that they may remind you that you have sharp teeth and claws of your own. Val wasn't sure if the other was alive, or ever had been, in the usual sense anyway. In the light of the monitors, she could see pulsing blue veins around where the machines plugged into her cellmate's flesh, but when she'd finally gotten brave enough to reach out to touch their face, it was cold, like everything else down here. But alive or not, the other was all that Val had in this underground tomb. She wasn't even sure if the other was human, but she stopped caring about that a long time ago. They were all she had, locked away down here. And whether it took weeks, months, or years, Val couldn't remember. But the oddly shaped face of the being became everything she needed it to be. The tubes that snaked in and out of the enshrined body gently hummed without change or interruption, not once giving protest to the fantasies of Val's unraveling mind. Until yesterday. Yesterday never happened. It wasn't real. It was all in her mind. She woke up the next morning against her will and screamed until she had no choice but to remember what it was that she saw. The tears. The tears that didn't stop once they started. Not once had it occurred to Val that the other had been in pain. She wasn't sure what the machines were for, but there were so many tubes and needles after all. How would that feel? Val was sick at the thought. She focused on the cool stone under her feet as she tried not to look at the other side of the room. But there was nothing for it, and she had nothing and no one else to occupy her. So she turned and saw not only tears, but an open mouth too, quivering with something that seemed too much like agony, only silent and stifled. She thought she would have more time to decide. All she had was time. But not for this. She had to choose. Keep the other as they were, and not be completely alone, or disconnect the machines and let at least one of them escape this place. Val paced and rocked and paced some more, all while avoiding the sight of the other, knowing that if she looked it would be over. The decision would be made. What once had been her only source of comfort, their face ageless and calm, the face that could have been of a mother, a brother, a friend, an enemy, or a stranger, or a lover, was now the sole representation of Val's greatest fear. All she could do was scream, and when her lungs had emptied themselves as many times over, she heard a new sound. The rattle was soft as it slipped from the other's pale lips, but there was no mistaking the solidarity in the attempted wail. That was enough. What was left of Val's mind that clung to the craving of a life free from here went to dust. She attacked the cords and hoses with a determination fueled by her despair. When the first alarm went off, she knew that for once, something she did made a difference. It wasn't until the monitors shut off that she paused. The darkness was instant and wrapped itself around Val like a shroud. She felt a cold hand against hers. Arms covered in limp tubes slipped around her ribs, squeezing her tight as the rattling grew louder in her ear. Within it, she heard a whisper, soft, sure, and free. They should have buried me deeper. Teeth sunk into her neck, and soon, Val was finally free of that place.
Hello, everyone. In between stories, we like to highlight a cause that is worth our collective attention. It's Pride Month, and we want to give a huge shout out to Lambda Legal, an incredible nonprofit that has been fighting for the civil rights of LGBTQ plus individuals and everyone living with HIV for over 40 years. From landmark court cases to advocating for policy changes, Lambda Legal is on the front lines ensuring equality and justice for all. You can find out more and donate at www.lambdalegal.org or from the link on our website at dropsofdarkness.com. Now, back into the shadows we go. I am someone, and I tell only truth. Whenever something slithers through the barrier between worlds, I am there, not to stop them, but to watch them and remind you of the countless terrors your kind has survived, all on their own. This happened when I was probably in the 8th grade or so. At this time, I lived with my brother and my dad. My brother Doug was working evening shifts at his job. He would normally come home around 9-10 p.m. I would wait up for him to come home so we could chat in the kitchen and eat some snacks before we both went to bed. I would wait in my room until I heard the front door unlock, and then I would go greet him in the kitchen. One particular night, I was doing the usual night routine where I would wait for him while I played video games or something to pass the time. And I heard the front door open and close, so I got up and opened my door to talk to Doug. Immediately, I noticed something was off. When I would go to greet Doug, he would already be in the kitchen with the light on, but when I opened the door, the kitchen light was off and I heard zero movement. I began feeling a bit scared, so I just stood there for a second. I called out his name and there was no response, until Doug peeked around the corner from the kitchen and smiled at me. Whatever it was looked just like my brother, except very pale, no eyebrows or eyelashes, and it had none of his facial hair. I stood in shock, staring back at whatever this was. Finally, it slid back behind the corner and disappeared. I backed into my room and shut the door. I was scared, but I was so convinced I was tripping that I ended up convincing myself it was my brother, and he just had face paint on. At that time, he was in a band and would do corpse paint a lot, so I thought he was just wearing the white base. I just waited in my room thinking he would knock and be like, haha, just kidding. But he never did. I then heard the front door open and shut a second time. I frantically walked out and met Doug at the door, and he wasn't wearing any face paint. I asked him if he was just in the kitchen, and he said he just barely got home. I told him what I saw, and at this point, I was scared there was an intruder in the house, so we both looked around the house, but there was no one. Also, my brother said that when he got home, the door was locked, and we checked the back door, and that was locked too. I still have no explanation as who or what that was, but from my research, the closest thing is the Doppelganger. The thing that was pretending to be my brother had very uncanny valley vibes.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Drops of Darkness, which is written, voiced, and produced by Anodyne Vaughn and Cameron Helkuik. If you enjoyed your drift into the shadows, help keep the stories alive by sharing the show, leaving a review, and if you really want to earn the favor of these dark storytellers, tether yourself to their world by tapping subscribe. If you have a true paranormal story of your own that you'd like to be read by someone, you can make the offering to submissions@dropsofdarkness.com or through the form on our website. Until next time, dear one, and remember, when the darkness looks your way, hold its gate.